Lieutenant Harper adjusted her gear for the third time that morning, though nothing felt wrong. Each strap on her tactical vest was snug, her boots laced perfectly, and the weight of her pack pressed into her shoulders with a familiar comfort. Despite years of training and countless drills, a subtle tension clung to her, like static electricity, raising the hairs on her arms. Today was no ordinary field exercise. It was the culmination of months of preparation, an elite simulation designed to push soldiers to their absolute limits. Every detail mattered. The sun rose over the barren, jagged hills of the training area, painting the landscape with hues of gold and crimson. Dust swirled in the thin morning air, stirred by a cold breeze that carried the scent of soil, sweat, and pine. Harper inhaled deeply, letting the crisp air steady her nerves. Around her, her unit moved in controlled chaos. Soldiers adjusted gear, checked weapons, and whispered final words of encouragement. Some laughed nervously, a brittle attempt at masking anxiety. Others stood silently, their eyes fixed on the terrain ahead. Harper's mind wandered briefly to her younger brother, who had once believed she could do anything. "She's unstoppable," he had said as a child, his eyes wide with admiration. Those words had stuck with her, a quiet motivation that both comforted and pressured her. She wasn't unstoppable, not yet, but she intended to honor that belief in every step she took today. Every drill, every drop of sweat, every long night of physical and mental training had led her to this point. She wasn't just proving herself to her team or her instructors, she was proving it to herself. Her team assembled near the rugged edge of the training field. The landscape was designed to mimic real-world conditions. Uneven terrain, scattered rocks, and hidden obstacles intended to challenge both endurance and tactical thinking. Harper glanced over the map they had studied the night before. Every detail had been memorized: the locations of mock enemy positions, supply drops, extraction points. The planners behind this exercise had left no margin for error. A wrong turn, a lapse in judgment, or a moment of hesitation could mean failure. Harper's heart beat a steady rhythm, her breath measured despite the anticipation coursing through her veins. She could hear the quiet hum of tension around her, the clink of equipment, the shuffle of boots, the low murmur of officers giving last-minute instructions. In a male-dominated unit, she had spent years carving her place, earning respect through performance rather than words. The stakes of today's exercise were higher than ever. Every observer, every instructor, every teammate would scrutinize her movements, evaluating her decisions and her ability to endure. Lieutenant Harper crouched briefly to adjust a strap on her pack, then rose, scanning the horizon. She noticed how the sun glinted off the jagged rocks, highlighting shadows that could conceal potential threats. Even in a controlled exercise, she treated the terrain as hostile, every instinct honed for survival. Her eyes fell on her teammates. Sergeant Rylan, known for his meticulous attention to detail. Corporal Hayes, whose humor often masked his sharp strategic mind. And Private Ortiz, eager but inexperienced. Each had strengths, but each relied on her just as she relied on them. Trust was paramount. A sudden gust of wind carried the sound of distant birds, though Harper's mind was too focused to notice their beauty. She ran mental drills scanning for threats, rehearsing her reactions, calculating time and distance. The field exercise was designed to simulate ambushes, unexpected injuries, and critical decision-making under pressure. Every scenario required split-second judgment, and every choice would be observed and judged. Harper's training had prepared her body, but today would challenge her mind as much as her strength. She thought of the countless hours she had spent alone, running miles before dawn, lifting weights, memorizing tactical manuals, and practicing medical procedures until her fingers bled. She had done it all to be ready for moments like this, to be counted on when situations spiraled out of control. Harper had endured injuries before, But the possibility of facing an unexpected crisis under extreme conditions still sent a shiver down her spine. Her determination was unwavering, yet a quiet, anxious energy buzzed beneath the surface, a reminder that even the most prepared soldier could be tested beyond imagination. The instructor's whistle pierced the morning air, signaling the start of the exercise. Harper's team moved into position with practiced precision, navigating rocky terrain and avoiding obvious lines of sight. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. Harper could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing against her chest, yet it grounded her. She led her team through the first phase, carefully coordinating positions, marking supply points, and anticipating potential ambushes. Even in these initial stages, the tension was palpable, a constant reminder of the high stakes. Harper's mind briefly flickered to her family, her younger brother, her parents, the sacrifices they had all made. She carried their expectations quietly, like a hidden armor beneath her tactical vest. The training field was harsh and unyielding, but it was also a proving ground, a place where courage, intelligence, and endurance intersected. She reminded herself that fear was natural, but hesitation could be deadly. Every movement, every decision, would reflect not only her capability, but the countless hours of preparation she had invested in, becoming the soldier she had vowed to be. As the sun climbed higher, shadows shifted, and the heat began to press against the edges of her resolve. Harper adjusted her posture, scanning the hills and valleys ahead. She was acutely aware of her team's trust in her and the critical importance of leading with confidence. Her muscles were ready, her mind sharp, and yet a small voice of doubt lingered in the back of her head, a reminder that no one, no matter how trained, could predict the chaos that lay ahead. The calm before the storm stretched on for minutes that felt like hours. Harper's breath was steady, her gaze unwavering. She could feel the latent energy of anticipation buzzing through the air, shared by every soldier around her. Then a distant explosion shattered the fragile peace, a jolt of chaos that instantly transformed the landscape. Harper's instincts snapped into action. Her legs tensed, her mind calculating the next moves, and her team followed her cues without hesitation. The ground shook beneath her. Dust and debris kicked into the air. Harper dove for cover, pain and adrenaline colliding in sharp, immediate clarity. This was no longer preparation. It was the real test, the moment where months of discipline and training would be pushed to their absolute limits. She could feel the burn in her lungs, the strain in her muscles, the pulse of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Every second demanded perfection, and even the smallest error could compromise the mission or her life. Despite the sudden chaos, Harper's mind was astonishingly clear. She issued silent signals to her team, directing movements with precision honed through countless drills. Her eyes scanned for threats, identifying potential dangers while guiding her colleagues through cover and tactical positioning. Her training had prepared her for this, yet the intensity of reality surpassed any simulation she had ever faced. The terrain, the noise, the chaos, it was all alive, unpredictable, and merciless. She felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on her shoulders than her gear ever had. For Harper, this moment was a crucible. It was where preparation collided with reality, where courage met uncertainty. Every heartbeat was a reminder that the calm before the storm was over. The battle, though simulated, was as real as any soldier could face in the field. And Harper, quiet, determined, and unyielding, was ready to face it head-on. She didn't speak. She didn't panic. She simply moved, every decision and action reflecting the countless hours, sacrifices, and relentless drive that had brought her to this exact moment. The deafening explosion shattered the fragile calm of the morning. Harper hit the ground instinctively, rolling to the side as a wave of force rattled the rocks around her. Pain flared sharply in her left leg, radiating through her hip and thigh in a burning, relentless pulse. Her tactical instincts kicked in immediately. Scan, move, secure. The world became a blur of dust, smoke, and the urgent shouts of her teammates. She gritted her teeth, biting back a scream as she assessed the injury. Blood seeped through the torn fabric of her pants, and a hot, pulsing pain reminded her that the simulation had become brutally real. Her mind race training would guide her now, every second demanding precision. She couldn't afford panic. Every movement mattered. Every delay could cost the mission or put a teammate in jeopardy. Harper refused to falter. Around her, the team responded with calculated urgency. Sergeant Ryland shouted orders, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Corporal Hayes covered the exposed flank, weapon raised, scanning for hidden threats. Private Ortiz, young and inexperienced, froze for a moment before Harper's gaze landed on him. A subtle nod from her told him to keep moving and trust his instincts. They had practiced this, drilled every contingency, and now it mattered more than ever. Harper forced herself to move, dragging her injured leg across the uneven terrain. Every step sent a surge of pain through her body, but she relied on controlled breathing and precise muscle memory. She assessed the environment, jagged rocks, dips, and natural cover that could provide temporary safety while the team regrouped. Her fingers brushed against her pack, checking supplies, first aid, tactical equipment, communications. Every detail was vital, every second critical. Survival depended not only on endurance, but also on the ability to think clearly under pressure. She recalled the countless drills, the nights spent in near darkness navigating obstacle courses, performing triage under stress, memorizing medical protocols. All that preparation converged in this moment. Harper's mind compartmentalized the pain, focusing instead on the task at hand. She stabilized her leg as best she could, applying pressure to slow the bleeding and minimize shock. Her breaths were measured, each exhale a small victory over the instinct to panic. The cries and shouts around her created a cacophony of urgency. Dust stung her eyes, sweat ran down her back, and the weight of her pack threatened to throw her off balance. She ignored it all, scanning the environment for tactical advantages. A cluster of rocks ahead offered temporary cover. Harper crawled forward, dragging herself inch by inch, muscles burning, lungs straining. Every movement was deliberate, silent, and precise. She refused to let pain dictate her actions. Time stretched and compressed in equal measure. Seconds felt like minutes, minutes like hours. Harper's focus narrowed to the immediate, the wound, the terrain, the position of her team. The simulation had been designed to test endurance, strategy, and mental fortitude, but the intensity of reality, the sharp edge of pain, and the constant pressure of potential failure made it something more. It was survival distilled, raw and unfiltered. Private Ortiz, now fully aware of the stakes, approached hesitantly. Harper gave him a hand signal, guiding him to help her stabilize the leg without exposing himself. His movements were awkward but earnest. Harper's gaze met his briefly, a silent reminder that fear was natural, but control was essential. Together, they crawled toward the rocky cover, navigating the jagged ground with a combination of skill and determination. A second blast, this one, smaller but equally disorienting, shook the terrain. Harper's heart pounded as the simulation's intensity escalated. She felt every vibration through her bones, every shudder in the earth amplifying her own pain. The team's cohesion became critical now. Every split-second decision could determine not only her ability to survive, but the effectiveness of their coordinated response. Harper's leadership, though quiet, became a guiding force. She pressed her back against a boulder, examining the wound with quick, methodical precision. Blood had soaked through the bandage she hastily applied, but shock hadn't set in yet. Harper inhaled deeply, forcing calm into her body despite the searing pain. Her fingers adjusted the pack, confirming that first aid supplies were accessible. The weight of responsibility, her own survival, and that of her teammates kept her grounded, focused, and determined. She had trained for this, and now it was time to act. The chaos intensified as the team regrouped around her. Sergeant Ryland provided cover fire, scanning the simulated battlefield for threats. Corporal Hayes communicated silently with hand signals, coordinating movement and monitoring escape routes. Harper relied on every bit of training, from tactical navigation to triage, to manage the situation. Pain coursed through her leg with each movement, but she forced herself to maintain composure. Every second counted, and panic was a luxury she could not afford. She remembered her instructor's words from countless drills. Pain is temporary. Precision is permanent. Control your mind, control your body, control the mission. Harper clung to that lesson, ignoring the throbbing agony, and guided her team to safer cover. Her calm demeanor under duress had a magnetic effect. Even Ortiz, who had faltered earlier, regained confidence under her silent command. Harper's presence became a stabilizing force, a quiet anchor amid the storm of chaos. Minutes stretched on. Harper's focus never wavered. She crawled forward again, scanning for tactical advantage while monitoring her own condition. The wound, though serious, had not incapacitated her. Every motion was calculated to minimize further injury while maintaining effectiveness in the field. She thought of her brother again, of the expectations she carried quietly in her heart. Today, proving her competence wasn't just about survival. It was about honoring every sacrifice she had endured. Then came a moment of clarity. A small ridge ahead could serve as both cover and vantage. Harper instructed Ortiz, using subtle hand signals, to follow her lead. She rose slowly, testing her leg, letting the pain guide rather than dictate her movement. Every muscle screamed in protest, but she pressed forward, each step measured, precise, and deliberate. The ridge offered temporary relief from the chaos, a place to regroup, assess, and plan the next move. Harper's mind was a whirl of tactical calculations. She checked her equipment, reassessing supplies and communications. Every detail mattered. She monitored the team, noting fatigue, hesitation, and injuries. She relied on her training and instincts, blending experience with intuition. Her silence in the face of pain became a statement. She was not defeated, she was not weak, and she would not falter. The intensity of the moment sharpened every sense, heightened every perception, and solidified her leadership under duress. But the wound refused to be ignored. Pain flared with each heartbeat, radiating through her body. Harper pressed against the ridge, breathing deeply, visualizing the next steps. She knew a SEAL medic would soon assess her injury, but until then, survival depended on composure, intelligence, and the quiet courage to act. The simulation had pushed her to the edge, and she teetered on the brink with determination as her anchor. Harper glanced at her teammates, noting their exhaustion and tension. She offered a subtle nod of reassurance, silently communicating that they were still in control. Even in the throes of injury and chaos, Harper's presence provided structure. Her mind calculated trajectories, cover points, and potential obstacles. She prepared for the arrival of the medic, understanding that evaluation and judgment would soon follow, but she refused to surrender control or dignity. The wind shifted again, carrying dust and echoes of distant activity. Harper adjusted her position, eyes scanning the horizon, muscles tensing in readiness. The pain was constant, but it no longer dominated her awareness. She focused on precision, leadership, and resilience. Every decision was deliberate, every action intentional. The ridge became both refuge and command post, a place where she could stabilize, assess, and continue the mission. In that tense, chaotic moment, Harper realized something vital. Strength was not only physical endurance, but the ability to remain composed under scrutiny and pressure. Her mind sharpened, instincts heightened, and determination solidified. She had endured pain before, but never under such intensity, never with so much responsibility resting on her shoulders. Harper's silence in the face of suffering became her weapon, her statement, and her shield. Finally, distant footsteps and a figure approaching signaled the next phase. The SEAL medic was on the way. Harper's eyes met those of Ortiz and Hayes briefly. Confidence, courage, and trust radiated between them. The stage was set for confrontation, assessment, and the moment when competence would be tested against doubt. Harper's preparation, resilience, and unwavering focus had carried her this far, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Harper's muscles trembled with fatigue as she pressed against the rocky ridge, her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement across the chaotic landscape. The distant noise of simulated explosions still reverberated in her ears, but something else caught her attention, a purposeful set of footsteps, deliberate and confident, approaching from the tree line. She recognized the gait instantly. A seasoned professional, unshakable under pressure. Chief Petty Officer Kane, AEAL medic, whose reputation was whispered in awe and dread alike, emerged from the haze of dust. Tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding authority, his presence demanded attention. His face was set in the calm, unreadable expression of a man who had seen blood, chaos, and human fragility countless times. As he drew closer, Harper felt a flash of apprehension. She had faced extreme conditions before, but Kane's presence alone carried weight. Every soldier who encountered him knew that no pretense would survive his scrutiny. Kane knelt beside her without hesitation, scanning the wound with practiced precision. Harper's breathing slowed, a conscious effort to remain composed despite the pain radiating through her leg. The medic's eyes flicked up at her, sharp and evaluating, and Harper felt the first prick of doubt she had allowed herself in hours. "This is bad," Kane muttered, voice low, steady, and devoid of drama. He didn't need to shout. The weight of his words pressed down on her. Then came the question. It landed bluntly, sharply, and with undeniable gravity. "Did your training prepare you for this?" Harper froze. Her initial instinct was defensive, an internal flare of anger, igniting at the subtle implication that she wasn't ready. Training had been everything countless nights, endless drills, sacrifices that no one could see. And yet here, in front of her, Kane questioned the very foundation of her capability. Harper didn't answer immediately. Her silence was deliberate, a conscious shield against the sting of judgment. Around them, her teammates shifted uneasily. Sergeant Ryland's jaw tightened, and Corporal Hayes exchanged a glance with Ortiz, the younger soldier's face betraying uncertainty. Kane's reputation preceded him. He was known for tearing down illusions of competence to reveal unshakable truth. His questions weren't idle, they were a test, and Harper knew it. The medic's hands moved efficiently, palpating her leg, assessing the depth and severity of the wound. His touch was firm but professional, precise, and unflinching. He noted the irregularity in her gait, the subtle tension in her posture. "You've got grit," he said almost as an afterthought, yet his eyes remained analytical. "But grit alone won't get you through this. Knowledge, composure, and proper technique will. Can you demonstrate that under pressure?" Harper's silence persisted, but her mind raced. She would respond with action, not words. Her thoughts flicked back to her early training, to moments when instructors had shouted, corrected, and pushed her beyond the brink of exhaustion. She had endured, adapted, and mastered the skills expected of her. Kane's presence now was another layer of challenge, an evaluation not only of her physical capability, but of mental resilience. composure under scrutiny, and the ability to remain effective when judged. Every muscle, every movement mattered. The medic continued his examination, noting how she stabilized herself against the ridge. Harper ignored the sting of embarrassment at being observed so critically. She allowed the pain to exist without letting it dominate her actions. Her silence became a form of defiance, a quiet statement that competence is shown through mastery, not explanation. Kane's eyes flickered with mild surprise. He hadn't expected her stillness to carry such a potent assertion of control. Harper subtly repositioned herself, testing her ability to move without exacerbating the injury. Kane's scrutiny remained relentless. Every adjustment, every micro-movement was noted, analyzed, and silently evaluated. She could feel the weight of the team's observation, but she also drew strength from it. She had faced skepticism before male instructors, fellow soldiers, even her own internal doubts. This was another crucible, and she would pass it not with words, but with precise, confident action. The medic finally straightened, his gaze lingering on her as he assessed the environment. "You've handled yourself well so far," Kane said, voice low, almost grudging in its acknowledgement. Then he paused, his eyes narrowing in focus. "But this scenario isn't over. Show me your process, your decision-making under stress, your triage protocol, and your ability to lead despite injury." "I need to see it." Harper's jaw tightened. She didn't flinch. She understood the unspoken challenge. Prove competence not through speech, but through flawless execution. She gave a subtle nod, and her mind shifted into hyper-focused mode. Her first step was triage, stabilizing her wound, checking vital signs, ensuring that if the situation escalated, she could respond efficiently. She located a field dressing, securing it with precision, applying enough pressure to control bleeding without compromising circulation. Every motion was calculated, fluid, and deliberate. Her silence amplified the tension, demonstrating control rather than defiance. Kane's lips pressed into a thin line, a subtle acknowledgement that she was following proper procedure. Her attention then turned to the team. Harper assessed their positions, noting fatigue, exposure, and readiness. Hand signals and subtle gestures coordinated movement, directing her teammates to safer positions without verbal commands. Ortiz responded immediately, following her silent guidance, while Sergeant Rylan and Hayes adjusted their coverage instinctively. The simulation had escalated, but Harper maintained composure, balancing leadership with physical limitation. Kane observed every nuance, his eyes reflecting both evaluation and growing respect. The medic's reputation as a blunt evaluator weighed heavily in Harper's mind. Kane had seen countless soldiers crumble under scrutiny, allowing ego or panic to dictate their actions. She understood that failure here would not only compromise her team, but also reinforce doubt about her preparedness. Yet, she refused to let it happen. Every decision was deliberate, every movement precise. Pain existed, but it did not dominate her awareness. Harper's silence became her instrument, demonstrating poise and resilience beyond words. Minutes passed in tense, deliberate action. Harper's team responded flawlessly under her silent command. She stabilized equipment, assessed the tactical landscape, and guided injured personnel to safer positions. Each motion reflected hours of preparation, internalized knowledge, and mental fortitude. Kane's presence loomed, but instead of intimidation, it sharpened her focus. She realized that the medic's scrutiny was not antagonistic. It was a mirror, reflecting her capabilities with brutal honesty. Harper accepted it fully, letting it drive her rather than hinder. Finally, Kane nodded slightly, stepping back to observe the broader picture. Harper had demonstrated triage, command, and tactical skill despite her injury. Her silent execution spoke louder than any words could have. Kane's sharp gaze softened subtly, acknowledgement replacing doubt. "You're competent," he stated, not as praise, but as a statement of fact. "You've passed the initial evaluation. Now, let's see how you handle sustained stress and decision-making under continued pressure." Harper's lips curved in a faint, controlled smile. She had made her point without needing to speak. The ridge offered temporary refuge, but the scenario was far from over. Harper repositioned herself, testing movement and balance. Her leg throbbed with pain, each shift a reminder of vulnerability. Yet in that vulnerability, she found clarity. Leadership was not about invincibility. It was about composure, calculated action, and mental endurance. Kane's presence, once a source of tension, had become a benchmark, a standard against which she could measure herself and rise. Harper's eyes swept the simulated battlefield once more. Dust rose from distant movements, shadows flickered across rocks, and the sound of distant explosions reminded her that danger was relentless. She signaled to her team, orchestrating repositioning without verbal commands. Each decision, each subtle gesture, reinforced her authority and skill. The SEAL medic's questioning had ignited a deeper determination, a drive to demonstrate mastery beyond doubt or observation. Harper was no longer just surviving. She was asserting control silently, decisively, flawlessly. As the sun climbed higher, Harper's thoughts returned briefly to her brother and her family. The stakes were larger than the simulation, larger than her team or herself. Every sacrifice she had made, every moment of doubt she had overcome, had led to this moment of undeniable capability. Kane's scrutiny had been a challenge, but Harper's response had been more than adequate. She had demonstrated the truth that competence is proven through action, not words. Kane finally rose, standing over her with measured observation. His arms crossed, he regarded her silently for a long moment. Harper met his gaze, unflinching. The medic's eyes flickered with a mixture of respect and acknowledgement. In that tense silence, the implicit understanding was clear. Harper had met the test of skill, composure, and resilience. She had not spoken, yet she had communicated everything necessary. The simulation, though ongoing, had already become a crucible of validation for her capabilities. Harper exhaled slowly, muscles still tense, mind still hyper-aware. Harper exhaled slowly, muscles still tense, mind still hyper-aware. Pain was present, fatigue creeping in, but her resolve had never been stronger. Kane's presence, once a source of anxiety, had become a proving ground, a catalyst for demonstrating silent, unwavering mastery. She had passed the first real evaluation under fire, proving not only to Kane, but to herself that training, preparation, and mental fortitude could overcome doubt, scrutiny, and adversity. After the initial chaos subsided, Harper found herself pressed against the jagged rocks, the ridge offering only minimal relief. Her leg throbbed relentlessly, a sharp, burning reminder of the explosion, and sweat clung to her uniform. The world felt simultaneously quiet and chaotic, as if time had fractured. Dust swirled in lazy eddies around her, but her mind spun at a speed her body could hardly match. She could hear the distant movement of her team, the muted commands of Sergeant Rylan, and the steady footsteps of Kane as he observed silently. Harper's gaze fell to her bloodied leg, her fingers brushing against the wound instinctively. Despite her training, a surge of frustration rose within her. Hours, weeks, months of preparation had led to this moment, and yet she had been questioned, doubted even, as she executed every step flawlessly. Pain and exhaustion intertwined with a deeper, more insidious struggle, the internal battle against self-doubt. Could she truly measure up? Had she truly internalized the lessons she had spent years learning? She remembered the earliest days of training, when instructors shouted corrections, and fellow soldiers cast skeptical glances at her determination. "You're too small," one had said. You can't endure what the rest of us can. Another had sneered. Harper had ignored the words then, letting her actions speak, pushing herself beyond limits until each taunt was rendered meaningless by sheer capability. Today, however, Kane's questioning carried a weight unlike any she had felt before. He didn't mock or belittle. He simply demanded truth. And truth was harsher than ridicule. It was unflinching, uncompromising, and piercing. Alone in her mind, Harper assessed herself with brutal honesty. Pain was present, yes, but it was manageable. Fear was present, yes, but it could be channeled. Her training had instilled reflex, knowledge, and endurance. Now it was her mental fortitude that would be tested. She let her thoughts drift through the past months of preparation. Long runs at dawn while the world slept. Endless drills in rain, wind, and snow. Hours of memorizing protocols and medical procedures until her mind ached. Every scar, every bruise, every drop of sweat had been a deliberate investment in moments like this. Yet the doubt lingered. Harper realized that no amount of preparation could fully remove the human element, the unpredictable variables of injury, environment, and judgment. Her mind flicked back to the explosion, the sudden chaos, the visceral sting of pain, and the fleeting uncertainty that had threatened to undermine her composure. She had acted decisively, but the questioning eyes of Kane reminded her that perfection in theory must be matched by execution in reality. Every second of hesitation, every subtle flaw could be magnified under scrutiny. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on her. Even in injury, she carried the responsibility of her team's well-being. Ortiz looked to her silently for guidance, his youthful determination untested in true adversity. Sergeant Rylan and Hayes relied on her decisions to navigate a scenario designed to push the mind and body to extremes. Harper understood that failure here would be more than personal. It would ripple through the team's cohesion, morale, and effectiveness. She could not allow herself the luxury of doubt. She inhaled slowly, letting each breath anchor her thoughts. Pain, fear, and frustration were acknowledged but contained. Harper focused on mental compartmentalization, a technique drilled into her over years. Separate what could be acted upon from what could not. The injury was present and significant, but it did not define her capability. The chaos of the field existed, but it did not dictate her response. And Kane's judgment, while formidable, was merely an observation. It could influence perception, but it could not dictate her truth. Memories of previous challenges flooded her mind. Training exercises that had seemed insurmountable, moments when she had felt exhausted beyond comprehension, nights spent questioning her own ability to continue. Each memory served as a reminder of resilience, a mental map of prior victories over adversity. Harper drew strength from them, letting each recollection sharpen her focus and reinforce her resolve. This moment, painful and chaotic, was another opportunity to prove herself, not to Kane, not to her team, but to herself. She reflected on the lessons learned in silence. Leadership was not about dominating with words. It was about demonstrating composure, clarity, and reliability when it mattered most. Harper understood that every subtle decision, every measured movement, every precise adjustment in the midst of chaos conveyed more than any explanation could. Silence was her tool, not weakness. Observation and action were her language. She had spent years perfecting this form of communication, and now it was time to wield it fully. Harper's mind circled back to Kane's words. "Did your training prepare you for this?" The blunt question echoed in her head, but now it no longer sparked frustration. Instead, it ignited determination. She would prove readiness not with words, but through mastery. Pain would not slow her. Doubt would not unmoor her. Her body was injured, yes, but her mind was sharpened and resolute. Every action would reflect the preparation, endurance, and silent strength she had cultivated over years of relentless effort. She tested her leg carefully, each movement in negotiation between pain and necessity. Harper adjusted her position, rechecking the makeshift bandage, confirming that supplies were accessible. Her team was in place, responding instinctively to her subtle cues. Ortiz mirrored her hand signals, moving with precision she could trust. Rylan and Hayes adjusted positions without hesitation. Harper allowed herself a quiet nod of satisfaction. She was guiding them effectively, even while managing her own injury. The internal struggle began to transform. Harper's initial wave of doubt had shifted into a quiet confidence, forged from experience and preparation. She recognized that vulnerability did not signify weakness. Acknowledging pain and fatigue allowed for clarity, not compromise. Her mind became a laser focus, slicing through chaos, prioritizing survival, command, and tactical efficiency. Each breath anchored her further, each heartbeat a steady drum of resolve. Kane's presence, once intimidating, became a measure by which she could gauge her own strength. Harper also reflected on the nature of courage. True courage, she realized, was not the absence of fear or pain, but the mastery of them. Leadership under duress demanded balance, acting decisively despite discomfort, remaining composed when scrutiny was sharpest, and prioritizing logic over instinctive panic. She understood now that the silent power she carried was just as critical as physical strength. Her silence, her calm, her deliberate precision under observation were proof that competence transcended spoken assertion. Minutes stretched, and Harper allowed herself a brief internal assessment. Fatigue and injury were undeniable, but clarity and command were intact. Her team trusted her. Her decisions were sound, and her actions reflected mastery over both circumstance and self. The storm of chaos continued outside, but within her mind, Harper had forged a controlled center, unshakable and precise. Kane's scrutiny had become an unexpected ally, sharpening her focus and compelling her to operate at the height of her potential. Finally, Harper allowed a fleeting recognition of triumph. Though the exercise was far from complete, she had conquered the internal battle, the doubts, the fear, the frustration. She had transformed pain into focus, observation into command, and pressure into precision. Her silent resolve radiated outward, influencing her team and shaping the unfolding scenario. Kane's questions, once a challenge, had catalyzed an unwavering demonstration of competence. Harper understood fully that true strength lay not in proving others right, but in proving herself unshakable, capable, and resolute. As the sun shifted higher in the sky, Harper pressed forward mentally, preparing for the next stage of the exercise. Her leg remained injured, the pain persistent, but she was no longer defined by it. She had faced doubt, scrutiny, and chaos, and had emerged with clarity, control, and determination intact. The inner struggle had been a crucible, forging a silent, unyielding mastery that no external observation could diminish. Harper's resolve was absolute. Harper took a deep, controlled breath, letting the sharp sting in her leg recede into the background of her focus. Pain was now a tool, a constant reminder of stakes, rather than an impediment. She moved slowly but deliberately from the rocky ridge, positioning herself in a way that allowed a full view of the chaotic field ahead. Her team mirrored her subtle hand signals, adjusting their formation instinctively. Every motion was a combination of precision and economy, balancing tactical advantage with injury management. Harper knew the next few minutes would determine more than survival. They would determine respect. The first task was triage. Harper knelt beside Ortiz, checking his vitals and ensuring that the simulated injuries sustained during the explosion were being treated correctly. Her hands moved with meticulous efficiency, guided by years of procedural memorization and instinctive practice. Every pulse check, every dressing applied, was executed without hesitation. Kane watched from a few meters away, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Harper was acutely aware of the scrutiny, yet her silence amplified her competence more than words ever could. Each precise action, each confident movement, communicated skill and authority. She shifted her attention to Sergeant Rylan and Corporal Hayes, who were covering the perimeter. Harper noted subtle fatigue in their movements, slight hesitations that could cost the team vital seconds in a real-world scenario. She gestured with a precise combination of hand signals and head movements, repositioning them to better cover the area. Rylan adjusted instantly, Hayes followed suit, and Ortiz mirrored the smallest gesture she made. Harper's leadership was quiet but undeniable. Her instructions were clear not through words, but through authority in action. Kane's sharp eyes followed every detail, tracking her efficiency and composure under stress. The simulation intensified as a series of small aftershocks and simulated secondary explosions rocked the field. Harper felt the vibration through her body, and pain flared in her leg with each step. Yet, instead of hesitation, she incorporated the discomfort into her movements, adjusting her posture, her pace, and her balance. Each calculated step allowed her to maintain command without compromising her stability. The ridge provided some cover, but the terrain demanded continuous attention. Harper scanned constantly, noting the positions of her team, potential hazards, and environmental factors that could influence both survival and tactical advantage. Harper's focus shifted seamlessly between multiple priorities. Her own injury needed management, the team required coordination, and the unfolding tactical scenario demanded rapid, decisive action. She adjusted Ortiz's positioning with subtle taps, signaling him to provide cover fire while she prepared an improvised triage station. Her hands moved deftly, stabilizing equipment and improvising solutions that allowed them to continue despite limitations. Kane's scrutiny remained, and she sensed his surprise at the calm efficiency with which she handled simultaneous responsibilities. Harper's actions were deliberate, precise, and unflinchingly competent. The SEAL medic finally spoke, his voice low but carrying authority. "You've got control, but let's see how you handle escalation." Kane indicated the next phase, a simulated threat that required Harper to coordinate rapid movement while maintaining injury care and strategic oversight. The scenario tested every skill she had honed, every ounce of training she had endured, and every mental reserve she could summon. Harper's jaw tightened, her focus sharpening. She had no intention of faltering now. Silence was her weapon, composure her shield, and precision her language. Harper instructed Ortiz to move to cover, guiding him with gestures as subtle as a twitch of her hand. She herself moved deliberately to a more central position, where she could oversee the scenario and maintain authority. Each step was measured, balancing the searing pain in her leg with the need for agility. Her team followed instinctively, responding to signals with fluid precision. Kane's expression remained neutral, but Harper detected a subtle shift in his gaze, a recognition that her actions were not only competent, but increasingly impressive under escalating pressure. The first simulated casualty reached her, a fellow soldier injured in the exercise. Harper knelt without hesitation, stabilizing the wound and assessing vital signs. Her hands moved with practiced precision, manipulating supplies and equipment efficiently, ensuring the simulated bleeding was controlled and the patient was secured. She gave Ortiz a subtle hand signal, directing him to maintain perimeter coverage while she continued triage. Her silence was purposeful. Action spoke louder than words. Kane's eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating each motion with a meticulous, almost surgical attention to detail. Next, Harper addressed the broader tactical challenge. The simulated threat had intensified, requiring movement across open terrain with limited cover. Harper assessed the safest route, considering elevation, sightlines, and potential hazards. She mapped the path mentally, signaling the team in a precise sequence that balanced safety with efficiency. Every decision was executed with clarity, each action a testament to her training and intuition. Kane's presence was a pressure point, yet Harper used it to sharpen focus rather than induce fear. The challenge was not to impress him, but to meet the standard he represented, unflinching mastery under extreme stress. Harper coordinated her team's movement across the terrain. Rylan and Hayes provided cover, responding fluidly to her silent instructions, while Ortiz advanced cautiously under her guidance. Harper moved last, testing each step of her injured leg, ensuring stability without slowing the formation. Pain flared, but she integrated it into her movements rather than resisting it. Every motion was deliberate, efficient, and purposeful. Her team's confidence grew as they mirrored her calm authority, executing maneuvers with precision that reflected both training and Harper's leadership. Kane's gaze followed them, an almost imperceptible nod acknowledging the competence on display. Once in position, Harper set up a secondary triage station while maintaining situational awareness. She assessed simulated casualties, prioritized care, and coordinated extraction points, all without speaking a word. Her actions radiated authority, and her team followed instinctively. Kane stepped closer, evaluating each choice and movement. Harper's silence communicated more than explanations could have. Her efficiency, composure, and clarity were impossible to ignore. The medic's initial skepticism began to give way to acknowledgement, as each deliberate action confirmed her skill and resilience under high-pressure conditions. The scenario continued to escalate. Simulated explosions, smoke, and shifting obstacles created a dynamic, chaotic environment. Harper maintained command, guiding the team through cover, managing injuries, and maintaining strategic oversight. Each decision reflected a combination of instinct, training, and calculated judgment. She adjusted her body posture to compensate for her leg, leaned on subtle gestures to communicate, and ensured that every teammate remained safe and effective. Kane observed silently, his expression unreadable, but Harper sensed growing respect in his measured attention. Her actions were undeniable proof of capability. Harper's focus shifted inward briefly, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Every early morning run, every late-night drill, every sacrifice of comfort and certainty, all of it had prepared her for this crucible. Pain, fatigue, and external scrutiny were no longer obstacles. They were elements to navigate, challenges to master. Her silent determination became a visible force, guiding the team through complexity and chaos with confidence and precision. Kane's presence, once a source of tension, now functioned as an unspoken benchmark, confirming her ability to excel under extreme evaluation. By the time the simulation reached its final phase, Harper's leadership had transformed the scenario. Team members moved fluidly, coordinated precisely, and executed commands efficiently. The triage had been managed flawlessly, strategic movement optimized, and threats navigated with competence and calm. Kane approached her finally, noting her posture, movements, and command presence. He spoke, his tone neutral, but carrying unmistakable acknowledgement. "You've handled yourself exceptionally. Your training, composure, and ability to lead under stress are solid. Well done." Harper did not respond verbally. Her silence had already conveyed mastery, and now it was validated by observation. As the dust settled, Harper allowed herself a brief exhale. Her leg throbbed painfully, and sweat soaked her uniform, but she had executed every task with precision, poise, and authority. The team looked to her with renewed confidence, their trust solidified by her example. Ortiz's eyes reflected awe. Raylan and Hayes nodded subtly, and even the distant observers seemed impressed by the efficiency of the operation. Harper realized the simulation had become more than a test. It was a demonstration of resilience, skill, and quiet leadership. Harper's mind lingered on Kane's evaluation. His questioning, once a source of tension and self-doubt, had catalyzed action rather than hesitation. She had responded with deliberate mastery, integrating pain, observation, and strategic thinking to maintain control. The silence that had been her shield became her voice, communicating authority, skill, and endurance more clearly than any words ever could. She understood that true competence was shown through execution, not explanation, and in that moment, she had proven herself beyond question. Finally, Harper allowed a flicker of satisfaction. The ridge was secure, casualties managed, tactical objectives met, and her team had responded with efficiency and confidence under her silent leadership. Pain remained, exhaustion lingered, but Harper's resolve was unshakable. She had turned scrutiny into a crucible, doubt into fuel, and chaos into precision. Kane's acknowledgement, though understated, validated what Harper had always known. Skill, composure, and resilience could triumph under pressure when anchored by preparation and silent determination. Harper remained kneeling briefly on the ridge, the weight of her injured leg pressing down as if reminding her that the battle was far from easy. Sweat stung her eyes, and dust clung stubbornly to her uniform, but the sharp edge of adrenaline that had fueled her moments ago began to soften. She felt the subtle shift in energy among her team. Ortiz stood straighter, his nervousness replaced by admiration. Rylan and Hayes relaxed slightly, their previous tension dissolving in acknowledgement of her command. Harper allowed herself a brief internal smile. Her actions had resonated. Chief Petty Officer Kane stepped closer, his measured gaze lingering on her with quiet intensity. Harper did not rise immediately, allowing the pause to hang in the air. Kane's reputation as an evaluator of raw skill and composure was unmatched. Acknowledgement from him was more meaningful than any verbal praise. "I underestimated you," he said finally, voice low, calm, and deliberate. Harper's jaw tightened, her lips pressing together, but she did not respond verbally. Her silence had already communicated her resolve, and now it carried the weight of quiet vindication. The team watched the exchange with a mixture of awe and relief. Ortiz's wide eyes reflected genuine admiration. He had followed her silent instructions under extreme pressure, and now he understood the full measure of her capability. Ryland's expression softened from analytical scrutiny to acknowledgement, while Hayes allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod. Harper's composure, even in injury, had served as a stabilizing force for them all. The respect she had earned was not instantaneous. It had been built moment by moment, action by action, under the unforgiving pressure of simulated chaos. Harper allowed herself a controlled exhale, her mind racing yet steady. Recognition, she realized, was not a reward for her efforts. It was the natural consequence of competence. Kane's admission, brief as it was, confirmed what she had known internally. Skill, preparation, and composure were visible, even when unspoken. She had transformed doubt and scrutiny into opportunity, executing flawlessly under pressure and demonstrating leadership without relying on words. In that moment, Harper understood that respect was not demanded. It was earned quietly, consistently, and undeniably. The ridge felt simultaneously lighter and more charged. Harper shifted slightly, testing her leg, and the subtle pain reminded her of her vulnerability. Yet it also underscored her resilience. She had acted decisively while injured, orchestrating tactical movement, managing simulated casualties, and maintaining command authority. Every motion, every hand signal, every silent directive had spoken louder than any explanation could. Kane's acknowledgement was a testament not only to her ability, but to the unspoken truth that Harper had endured countless challenges to arrive at this moment of mastery. As the team regrouped, Harper observed their changed demeanor. Ortiz now mirrored her movements with confidence. Ryland's responses to tactical adjustments were sharper, and Hayes seemed lighter, more trusting in her guidance. The subtle shift in team dynamics was unmistakable. They no longer followed out of necessity, they followed with respect. Harper's influence had been forged under pressure, proving that quiet competence and unwavering composure could inspire far more than words ever could. Leadership, she realized, was as much about presence as it was about instruction. Kane's scrutiny, once intimidating, had become a benchmark. Harper understood now that the medic's blunt challenge had not been antagonistic. It had been an opportunity. By meeting his high standard without hesitation or faltering, she had solidified her credibility. Kane's eyes flickered with acknowledgement, a subtle but unmistakable approval. Harper did not need verbal accolades. His measured observation confirmed her worth in a way that resonated, deeper than any spoken commendation could. Her actions had spoken for themselves, leaving no room for doubt. Harper rose slowly, testing her leg and adjusting her posture. The burn of pain persisted, but it no longer dominated her awareness. Bettine's formation stabilized behind her, their movements fluid and confident. Harper realized that the respect she had earned extended beyond Kane's acknowledgement. It had reshaped the perception of every teammate in her unit. Their trust was now fully earned, their confidence anchored in her competence. Harper's silence, once a shield against scrutiny, had become a beacon of authority and reliability. She allowed herself a rare moment to reflect. The exercise had been designed to test endurance, skill, and decision-making under extreme conditions, and she had excelled. Every obstacle, every simulated casualty, every tactical maneuver had been executed with precision despite injury. Harper's composure, honed over years of relentless training, had carried her through the crucible. Kane's respect, the team's trust, and her own quiet satisfaction converged into a profound understanding. Mastery was not about perfection, but about resilience, poise, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. The sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rugged field. Harper's uniform was dust-streaked, her face smeared with sweat, but her posture radiated controlled authority. Kane approached, standing beside her silently for a moment before speaking again. "You led your team under pressure and injury with precision. That's not something many can claim." Harper acknowledged the words with a subtle nod, allowing her silence to absorb the compliment. She did not need to speak. The proof lay in every action she had executed flawlessly. Ortiz stepped closer, his voice quieter now, but filled with genuine admiration. "Lieutenant, you were incredible. I don't know if I could have done what you did." Harper allowed herself the briefest flicker of pride, but redirected attention to her team. Praise from others was secondary. The true measure was the confidence they had gained from her guidance. Ryland and Hayes exchanged glances and nodded, reflecting a quiet consensus. Harper's leadership had been undeniable, forged in the crucible of adversity, and cemented through precise, decisive action. Even the terrain seemed to acknowledge her victory. The rocky ridge, the uneven ground, the dust swirling in the afternoon light, all had been part of the challenge she had mastered. Harper's gaze swept across the field, noting the positions of every teammate, every obstacle, and every point of tactical advantage. The recognition she received was quiet but pervasive. Kane's nod, Ortiz's admiration, and the silent acknowledgement of Ryland and Hayes confirmed that Harper's actions had spoken louder than words ever could. She had proven herself without boasting, without explanation, and without compromise. Harper's mind drifted briefly to the broader implications. Respect was not given lightly, especially in a unit where every soldier was trained for excellence. To earn it, one had to demonstrate competence under scrutiny, endurance under pressure, and the ability to maintain composure when stakes were highest. Harper's silence, once a shield against doubt, had become a form of communication far more effective than any verbal reassurance. Kane's recognition and her team's trust were the culmination of years of preparation and relentless determination, proof that mastery is measured by action, not words. As the exercise wound down, Harper remained vigilant, ensuring her team returned to a secure formation. The simulated threats had been neutralized, casualties stabilized, and tactical objectives met. Kane observed silently, then stepped back, a subtle but unmistakable acknowledgement of her command. Harper's satisfaction was quiet but profound. She had endured the chaos, the injury, and the scrutiny and emerged not only competent, but commanding, resilient, and respected. The ridge that had been her temporary refuge now felt like a stage on which she had silently demonstrated mastery. Finally, Harper allowed herself a brief, internal acknowledgement of accomplishment. Pain, fatigue, and dust remained, but they no longer dominated her awareness. She had earned respect, not through words or argument, but through deliberate action, precise execution, and unwavering composure. Kane's measured acknowledgement and her team's quiet admiration confirmed what Harper had always known. Leadership is proven through action, resilience, and the ability to maintain control under pressure. The recognition was not the goal, it was the natural outcome of her mastery, silently demonstrated. Harper leaned against the ridge, her back pressed to the jagged rock, and allowed herself a moment of stillness. The chaos of the exercise had subsided, leaving only the low murmur of her team and the distant echoes of simulation equipment. Her leg throbbed, each pulse reminding her of the injury she had endured, but her mind was surprisingly clear. In that rare stillness, Harper began to reflect on everything that had transpired, the challenges, the scrutiny, and the victories that had gone largely unspoken. She thought back to the moment Kane had first questioned her training. The bluntness of his inquiry had stung initially, provoking frustration and the faintest trace of anger. Harper had spent years honing her skills, enduring long nights of drills and pushing through exhaustion. And yet here was a man whose reputation alone carried enough weight to make her question herself. But the sting of doubt had been fleeting. Instead, it became a catalyst, a challenge to prove capability not with words, but with precision, composure, and execution under pressure. Harper allowed her thoughts to drift further back to the early days of her career. She remembered the long runs at dawn, the weight of a pack far heavier than her body, and the endless drills designed to push both mind and body beyond known limits. She remembered the instructors who doubted her, the peers who questioned her ability, and the moments of isolation when persistence seemed the only viable option. All of those experiences, once burdens, now felt like preparation. They were the foundation upon which her recent performance had been built. The reflection shifted naturally to the team. Harper observed Ortiz quietly reorganizing gear nearby, Ryland scanning the surrounding terrain, and Hayes adjusting equipment with subtle efficiency. She recognized how the dynamics had shifted over the course of the exercise. Initially, her leadership had been silently tested, every command carefully observed, every decision scrutinized. Now, the subtle energy in the team had changed. Confidence had replaced hesitation, trust had replaced doubt, and respect had replaced uncertainty. Harper understood that her composure and precision had been contagious, shaping not only outcomes, but the perception and morale of those around her. She also reflected on Kane's presence and the role it had played in her development. The SEAL medic's reputation had loomed over the exercise like a silent gauntlet, testing not only her skill, but her ability to maintain composure under observation. Harper realized that Kane's blunt questioning and careful scrutiny had served as an external mirror, forcing her to confront doubts she might otherwise have ignored. His presence had illuminated both strength and vulnerability, providing a crucible in which she had tested herself, and emerged stronger, more focused, and more confident. Pain remained, a persistent reminder of physical limits, but Harper had learned something essential. Resilience was not the absence of pain, but the ability to act despite it. Her mind wandered through the moments of the exercise when she had integrated discomfort into decision-making, when each subtle adjustment in posture and movement allowed her to maintain authority. She had transformed weakness into strategy, hesitation into precision, and scrutiny into opportunity. Reflection revealed a deeper truth. Growth had been incremental, built on countless small victories that, when combined, had created undeniable competence. Harper's thoughts turned inward, to the subtle yet profound lessons she had internalized. Leadership was not about commands shouted over chaos. It was about quiet authority, calm decision-making, and strategic awareness. Excellence was not demonstrated through words, but through flawless execution under pressure. Resilience was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it, the ability to remain composed and effective when stakes were highest. These lessons, once abstract concepts in training, had become visceral truths forged in the heat of experience. She considered the transformation she had undergone during the exercise. Harper had begun the day with tension, anticipation, and uncertainty, but by the end, she had achieved a state of flow, a seamless integration of skill, intuition, and observation. Actions that had once required conscious effort now emerged naturally, guided by experience and preparation. Every decision had been deliberate, every motion precise, every silent instruction communicated with authority. Harper understood that the exercise had revealed her potential not only to others, but to herself, solidifying the confidence she had carried quietly through years of preparation. Harper also reflected on the broader significance of recognition. Kane's measured acknowledgement, Ortiz's admiration, and the subtle approval of Rylan and Hayes had validated her actions without needing verbal praise. She realized that true respect was earned through competence and composure, not demanded through argument or assertion. Recognition, she understood, was the natural outcome of mastery, demonstrated consistently under pressure. The silent affirmation of those around her reinforced a principle she had long internalized. Leadership and respect are earned, not given. She took a deep, controlled breath, centering herself. Reflection revealed not only personal growth, but a broader awareness of responsibility. Harper's performance had influenced more than just her own outcomes. It had shaped the confidence, efficiency, and morale of the entire team. She understood that her actions had created a ripple effect, reinforcing the importance of composure, clarity, and precision in high-pressure situations. Reflection confirmed what she had felt in the moment. Leadership was as much about presence as it was about direction, and influence was often communicated through silent authority rather than words. Harper's thoughts turned to the future. She considered how the lessons learned today could be applied in real-world scenarios, beyond simulation or training. The integration of skill, composure, and decision-making under pressure was a formula for success that extended far beyond the boundaries of the exercise. She reflected on the value of preparation, the importance of endurance, and the necessity of maintaining calm under scrutiny. These principles, she realized, would continue to guide her throughout her career and life, shaping every challenge she faced and every team she led. Even the injury, once a source of frustration, now felt like a testament to perseverance. Harper acknowledged that vulnerability had provided an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and adaptability. Pain had not weakened her. It had refined her actions, sharpened her focus, and highlighted her capacity to lead under adversity. Reflection revealed a paradoxical truth. Limitations had catalyzed mastery, and challenges had fostered growth. She understood that every difficulty, when approached deliberately, could be transformed into a tool for self-improvement and effective leadership. As the exercise concluded, Harper allowed herself one final moment of stillness. She observed the environment, dust settling over the rugged terrain, teammates quietly reorganizing, and the subtle hum of the simulation winding down. She reflected on every action, every decision, and every subtle hand signal that had guided her team through chaos. The experience had tested not only her skill, but her mental endurance, her leadership, and her capacity for silent authority. Harper recognized that growth was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, cumulative, and revealed only in reflection. Finally, Harper's thoughts returned to herself. She had endured scrutiny, injury, and extreme pressure, and had emerged not only competent, but confident, respected, and aware of her own resilience. The reflection allowed her to internalize lessons fully, connecting the dots between preparation, execution, and recognition. Harper understood now that mastery was not a single achievement, but a continuous process of action, assessment, and adaptation. Her growth was both personal and professional, anchored in experience, refined under pressure, and validated through observation. The dust had finally settled across the rugged training field, leaving a quiet stillness that contrasted sharply with the chaos of hours before. Harper remained kneeling briefly, catching her breath, feeling the steady pulse of pain in her injured leg, but also a surge of quiet accomplishment. The simulation was over, yet its impact reverberated not only through her body, but through her mind, her team, and the subtle acknowledgement of the SEAL medic, Kane. This had been a test in every sense: skill, endurance, leadership, and resilience. Harper had passed, and she knew it in a way that transcended words. Kane approached her, the measured pace and calm authority that had dominated the exercise, now carrying an unmistakable acknowledgement. "You executed flawlessly, under conditions that would have broken many," he said, voice low but firm, his eyes meeting hers with respect. Harper allowed herself a small nod, absorbing the validation silently. Words were unnecessary. Her actions had spoken for themselves, and Kane's recognition confirmed the truth she had demonstrated every moment of the simulation. She had earned more than acknowledgement. She had earned undeniable credibility. Harper's teammates gathered around, their expressions a mix of admiration, relief, and respect. Ortiz, once hesitant and unsure, now stood with quiet confidence, reflecting the assurance that Harper's leadership had instilled. Rylan and Hayes, seasoned and experienced, exchanged subtle nods that conveyed approval without need for ceremony. Harper felt a warmth in that silent acknowledgement, understanding that respect was forged in shared experience, under pressure, and through the quiet assertion of skill. Leadership, she realized, was less about authority in words, and more about presence and decisive action when stakes were highest. She tested her leg again, each movement precise, deliberate, and careful. Pain was constant, but it no longer dominated her awareness. The injury had served its purpose. It had tested her endurance, her mental control, and her ability to lead while vulnerable. Harper reflected on how every challenge, from physical strain to mental scrutiny, had been a stepping stone toward growth. She had endured, adapted, and emerged stronger, not only physically, but psychologically. Pain had become a teacher, and mastery had been the lesson. As the team began to pack up, Harper's mind wandered briefly to the journey that had led her here. She thought of early mornings spent running in darkness, grueling drills, and instructors who doubted her abilities. She recalled the countless repetitions of tactical maneuvers, triage procedures, and leadership exercises, each seemingly tedious in isolation, but cumulatively shaping her into a soldier capable of command under pressure. The reflection brought clarity. The path to competence had been long, arduous, and often invisible, but every step had been essential. Harper glanced at Kane one final time. The SEAL medic had observed every decision, every motion, and every nuance of the exercise. His quiet acknowledgement, now coupled with a subtle nod, spoke volumes. Harper understood the significance. She had not only met the challenge, but had exceeded expectations without needing to assert herself verbally. Silence had been her ally, composure her weapon, and precision her proof. Kane's approval was a seal on her achievement, confirming her capability beyond doubt. The team began moving toward extraction points, and Harper followed with calculated steps, guiding them subtly with gestures and direction. Ortiz mirrored her every movement, demonstrating confidence and initiative that had been absent earlier. Rylan and Hayes fell into formation seamlessly, their respect for her command evident in every coordinated action. Harper observed the transformation with quiet satisfaction. Her leadership had been validated not by spoken praise, but through competence and cohesion under pressure. Finally, they reached the designated safe zone. Harper allowed herself to take a breath that was entirely her own, one unpressured by urgency, chaos, or scrutiny. The ridge that had served as both refuge and crucible now stood as a testament to endurance, preparation, and silent mastery. Harper's mind reviewed every challenge of the exercise, every decision made under pressure, and every subtle adjustment that had ensured the safety and efficiency of her team. The reflection was not simply retrospective, it was a confirmation of growth and resilience. Kane approached once more, his presence still authoritative, but tempered by acknowledgement. "You've demonstrated leadership, composure, and skill that exceed expectations," he said. "Under real-world conditions, you'd inspire confidence, not doubt." Harper met his gaze steadily, absorbing the validation without a word. The recognition was not the point her actions had already spoken, but it was the final confirmation of the lessons she had internalized throughout her career and solidified under fire. As the team prepared for debrief, Harper allowed herself a moment to reflect on the personal dimension of triumph. She remembered the moments of doubt and fatigue, the times when she had questioned her own endurance and skill. Each challenge, each pang of pain, and each silent trial had contributed to this moment of quiet victory. Harper recognized that resilience was not merely surviving adversity, but mastering it, transforming it into competence, confidence, and leadership that others could trust and follow. The debrief was brief, but thorough. Harper articulated her assessment of the exercise in measured, precise terms, describing strategy, execution, and tactical decisions succinctly. Kane listened intently, offering minimal commentary, yet his approval was evident in subtle cues, the slight nod, the thoughtful gaze, and the lack of critique. Harper's actions, rather than her words, had communicated her mastery. She had earned respect, proven capability, and reinforced trust without the need for argument or assertion. Her leadership had been quietly undeniable. Finally, as the team began to move toward recovery and medical evaluation, Harper allowed herself one last internal acknowledgement of triumph. The exercise had tested her physical limits, mental control, and leadership ability. She had navigated injury, scrutiny, and escalating pressure, while maintaining composure, precision, and authority. The validation she received from Kane, her team, and her own reflection was not simply a reward, but the inevitable result of preparation, resilience, and mastery. Harper understood fully that competence and respect were earned silently, through action under pressure, and had demonstrated both conclusively. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, Harper felt a sense of closure. The ridge, once a place of chaos and pain, had become the stage for her silent triumph. Every injury, every moment of doubt, and every challenge had contributed to growth, clarity, and recognition. She had faced scrutiny, led under pressure, and emerged not only intact, but stronger, respected, and confident. Harper understood the lesson fully. True mastery is proven under fire, validated through action, and acknowledged quietly by those who observe with insight. The final moments were marked by quiet camaraderie. Ortiz walked beside her with a newfound sense of confidence, Rylan and Hayes shared subtle smiles of respect, and even Kane maintained his composed, approving demeanor. Harper's presence had transformed the team's perception, instilling trust, cohesion, and confidence through action rather than words. She understood now that leadership was less about command and more about influence, the silent guidance that shapes outcomes, inspires confidence, and ensures effectiveness under extreme pressure. Harper's gaze lingered on the horizon, reflecting on the journey and the lessons internalized. Every trial, injury, and challenge had been part of the process, shaping not only her ability to lead, but her understanding of resilience, composure, and mastery. Kane's acknowledgement, the team's trust, and her own reflection confirmed what she had long suspected. Competence is silent, enduring, and undeniable when demonstrated consistently under pressure. Harper had emerged from the crucible stronger, wiser, and fully capable, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.